Let's talk about the saga of the Plasmatic Discharger. This weapon came out with the invasion weapons 9 months ago. This is a timely video. Then its perks didn't work, so I made a best perks video in complete satire just talking about it, but it was more than that. It's not just that the perks didn't work, the weapon wasn't classed as a weapon. It wasn't a weapon that was melee, it wasn't an explosive weapon, it just said nothing there instead. So what ended up happening was that in the Storm King fight, it actually affected the Storm King's horn. So we did an entire fight literally only using the Discharger and got like a really quick time, but at the same time we found out that even without perks, this thing shredded the Storm King. Then after a while, you know, they said they were going to fix it, and then they did. They made it so that the perks functioned, which was kind of a buff because we were all enjoying this weapon at its base damage with no bonus whatsoever. So once crit rating and crit damage and damage to miss monsters started stacking in, it was a significant damage bonus. It actually became really, really good. And then the major nerf happened. Wait, that says buffs. Yeah, so they did a thing where they removed the damage perk. Here, I'll show you. And they made it miss monsters and bosses. So if you have a copy of the Plasmatic Discharger with a damage perk in the middle, instead, that is a legacy copy. If you care about that, keep that copy. It'll be more damage versus normal enemies, which means nothing because this weapon will destroy those enemies without perks. I know that. I've been there. So you don't need to keep it. It's not better. That's what I'm getting to here, but it's a thing. It's legacy if you want to keep it. So they took out that damage perk and replaced it with a second damage to miss monsters and bosses, and they agreed that this weapon was too strong. Did I mention that it only costs 3 energy cells to shoot this thing back in the day? Oh yeah, now it's 30. They really upped the price on that, and they had a huge slash to this damage. It went from 100% of its damage to 95%. Yeah, they did a 5% damage nerf. What even is that, Epic? You basically did nothing. I don't know why. Anyway, it was basically not a damage nerf. In fact, the 6% extra damage to miss monsters and bosses kind of made it a 1% damage nerf. If you want to dig into the numbers, that's not literally how it works out. It's like nothing. It's like a 2% real damage difference. It's not a big deal at all. So the current state of this weapon is basically like this. Almost everybody runs it this way. Crit rating, crit damage, double damage to miss monsters and bosses. That is why it took me 9 months to make this video. That saga was not just me having fun, even though it was. I made like 9 or 10 videos on this. Like we ran it with MSK, we ran it with MSK, we ran it with MSK, we ran it with encampments, we talked about fixing it. I covered this weapon as thoroughly as I could. So I just never made this best perks video because honestly, a screenshot is plenty. I think a lot of times in my best perks videos, I get teased because it just run crit. Why do you need to watch it? Well, a lot of times weapons have multiple different ways to run. This one does not. Like, let's talk about this. The only thing you could possibly do is double crit damage. If you have totally rocking out with crit rating crit damage, it shreds MSK. Editor, can we get that 3-second clip of the Jack's Revenge video? Link to that entire video down below. We ran MSK with Jack's Revenge, but we used the Discharger in the end phase with the totally rocking out team perk. That is the fastest death I have ever seen in the Mythic Storm King fight. It was annihilated. Could you imagine if that was double crit damage? We would have killed it in 2 seconds instead of 3, which is honestly, who even cares? So there's really no variety here. You basically just run double miss monsters and bosses, or if you are somebody who's lucky enough to still have a damage copy, then you can do that as well. Supercharging this thing is a super good idea, and it's honestly just a super fun weapon. The only other areas to talk about are the 5th perks, where damage to miss monsters and bosses is universally recommended because the damage to slowed and snared is actually non-functional to my understanding. Like, the stacks of slow that get applied to enemies is not slowed and snared. I don't know why. If I'm completely wrong and I got something wrong, comment down below and correct me. I haven't tested this in recent history because it just doesn't matter. The difference is like 9%. So if that slowed and snared does affect it, then you might want that. But like I said, normal enemies are getting annihilated no matter what. The only things you need any extra damage against are miss monsters and bosses. And I wanted to do a little factoid. Thank you to AWalry for pointing this out to me. If you have ever had trouble killing a normal mini boss with this, a fatty mini boss with this, or even regular miss monsters sometimes, you're not alone. The situation that's occurring here is that smashers are inordinately weaker to it than any other enemy. If smashers get completely shredded by this weapon, it must have to do with their hitbox. That's my best guess. If you've ever ran this in the Storm King fight, you know that those mini bosses stand no chance, and it's because they're all smashers. And in the Storm King fight, they're a little bit more forgiving. There's no smoke screen, there's no trap vulnerable, both of which will weaken the Discharger. Do not use the Discharger versus trap vulnerable mini bosses. Stop wasting wasting your energy cells. You're being a bad teammate. Don't waste it on a smoke screen. You should be using a melee or an ability. Don't use the discharger in those fights. And then there's no tank mini bosses, which, by the way, I ran a test one time with Rosie. We compared the footage back and forth. Tank mini bosses take half the damage, which means tank mini bosses are essentially double health, which is tricky. They don't literally have double health. You do less damage. It's kind of weird, but it's the same thing in the end. So my point is, because you don't have any of those weird modifiers and they are smashers, they get annihilated in the Storm King fight. However, most people still use the pot shot and the Wrath in the Storm King fight because the discharger takes 3 seconds to charge up. I have never done this before. I take my credibility very seriously. I think that's why I'm the top, if not one of the top Save the World content creators. I take my credibility very seriously. I've never done this before, but I called it the best weapon in Save the World. Where is it? I called it the best weapon in Save the World, and I believed that at the time. I think it had 3 energy cells at the time. Maybe it still had 30, but I really think that the damage per energy cell is tremendous. You can shoot this into a... Can we roll the clip of the Fortnite clip? I think I have that on hand. We shot this at 3 level 500 mini bosses in Fortnite, and all of them died to like 120 energy cells worth of ammo. That is absurd. Nothing in the game can even do that. And that's where I'm coming from when I call this the best in the game. But we still don't use it in the Storm King fights because that 3-second warm-up time is crazy. I've been embarrassed in a lot of fights where I go to take out the mini boss, you know, being a good teammate, and then I hear the klachunk and klachunk of the pot shots, and then it's dead before I shoot my shot. Then I'm just sending 30 energy cells at a 10% health mini boss if it's not dead already. And then I'm like, what the hell was that? Why did I even do that? So it can be really good for shooting that orb into a choke point, killing a bunch of enemies walking into it, but you actually have to be really careful in normal missions. It's not a panic weapon. You can't just pull it out and murder everything. The Plasmatic Discharger actually weirdly struggles in normal situations like that. However, I get back to my main point. The damage from this thing is unparalleled. If you are the first person to shoot a mini-boss with it or a smasher and your teammates aren't coming in with the faster weapons before you get there, the damage is tremendous. So this weapon can be insanely strong, super good for locking down choke points. It is the best weapon for the Mythic Storm King end phase, bar none. The old favorite was the Deatomizer, but it is 5 more energy cells and significantly less damage. The Plasmatic Discharger just wins every single time. The 6 perks, I never even talked about because they don't matter. Damage dealt to under 15% health has never worked and doesn't really need to. If this weapon hits an enemy, giving you shields is kind of whatever. This is the only perk that matters because not only is it the only one that matters, but it actually does an amazing job. So that stack of slow is great. What it essentially does is it slows down an enemy in 10 stages until they just freeze. Completely freeze in place. So not only are you slowing down a smasher that's running at your walls, but it's frozen while the discharger shreds it apart. It's a beautiful combo. It is an excellent sight to see, and it is the 6 perk that I recommend on this weapon. So yeah, this weapon is awesome. And I didn't feel like I needed to make the best perks because I felt like I covered it thoroughly. But this is, if I'm going to call it the best weapon in the game, then I am just being a bad YouTuber by not having this video. So it exists now. The video exists. Subscribe if you want more. Comment down below. I hope the editor did a good job on this video putting in gameplay because I basically just stared at this screen for like 9 minutes. And I hope my story time made this weapon enjoyable. It went through a lot of phases. It went from perks not working to perks working to getting nerfed, but then also kind of buffed, leaving some people with a legacy copy that's better against normal enemies, and then everybody else with a copy that just shreds mist monsters and bosses. It's a very confusing weapon to keep up with. I still get comments on the Storm King Horn video asking me if that works. No, it was patched like a week later, guys. Come on. Anyway, great weapon. Go perk it. Go have fun. Go shoot some stuff. Enjoy the smashers' deaths. And I'll see you guys in the next video. My alarm on my phone's going off. It's time to do my Pokemon Megas. Good night or good morning, whenever you're watching this. Enjoy the food you were eating. Subscribe. I'll see you later. Thanks for watching. And then